4. Mendelin's head throbbed horribly, and not for the first time since his brother had been wrongly accused of the deaths of the missionaries. Old Dyson's brother leaned against a tree in the woods deep to the north, one hand against his temples. He tried to fight down the pain. But worse than ever than the pounding was that this was the third time now that he had blacked out for a period of time. The last he recalled, he had been on his way from the farm to see his brother. Putting his fingers to the bridge of his nose, the younger son of Domedes squeezed his eyes shut. He hoped that the action might relieve some of the pressure. The image of the robed man screaming filled his head. With a grunt, Mendelin stumbled from the tree trunk. He looked around, certain that what he had seen taking place before him at that very moment. But the woods were empty. Mendelin gradually realized it. While the man's mouth had been open, no sound had come from it. Mendelin recalled hearing the wild rustling of the grass and even the sound of thunder, but not the voice. A momentary nightmare? A figment of his overwrought imagination brought on by the heinous murders? Mendelin could believe the experience, nothing else. And yet, it had seemed so real. The throbbing abruptly renewed its assault. His eyes shut again as the pain overcame him. And once more, Mendelin was assailed by the image of the man. Only this time, the figure lay sprawled, helpless, on the ground, as something loomed over him. Utter fear covered the missionary's face, as he sought in vain to crawl on his back away from whoever approached. Mendelin opened his eyes, and the scene vanished. This time, though, old Dyson's brother understood that what he witnessed was neither a figment nor an event of the present. He was indeed alone in the woods. No, this time the glimpse had lasted long enough for him to recognize the garments of the screaming man, if not the man himself. It had been the garb of an acolyte from the Triune, and the man had been the emissary who had been so brutally slaughtered. Mendelin shook. What did it mean? Why was he suddenly having these monstrous visions of the missionary's murder? There had never been any talk of witchcraft in either side of the family, and Mendelin himself doubted that was the case. There had to be a more reasonable, honest explanation. His nose itched. Mendelin realized that there was something on the bridge. He brushed at it and was rewarded with several bits of dirt in his palm. In fact, for the first time, he saw fresh dirt covered most of his fingers. When had that happened? Old Ice's brother had not been at the farm, much less working in the fields, for some time. He had been too concerned about helping his sibling. Had he, for some reason, fallen while riding? That might explain both the latest blackout and the dirt. What is happening? Mendelin muttered. His life had always been an utterly normal and even boring one. Now everything was turning on its head. These blackouts, old Dyson's dire predicament, the ancient stone. The stone. Mendelin was no believer in coincidence. He had not started to have these blank moments until after touching the artifact. Somehow, it affected him in a manner that he could not fathom. Oh, Mandolin heard stories in his childhood about magic places and creatures, but those had just been that, stories. It occurred to him to wonder why he now specifically saw the murder of the acolyte. The first notion that entered his thoughts drained the blood from his face. No, I did not. I could not. Had the reason that he had seen the murder, and from such a frontal angle, had been because he had somehow been responsible? But common sense prevailed. Mandolin had always been with Achilles the whole time, and that the murders had taken place. Therefore, he was innocent for the nefarious in it, just as old Diason surely was. However, that still did not answer for the dirt on his hands, nor the odd and lengthening periods of memory loss. The aspects of those frightened Mandolin greatly. He thought again of his brother, a prisoner. The image of old Diason in the cell steeled Mandolin. He could concern himself with his own troubles when the time permitted. What was most important was seeing that old Diason languished in the cell no longer than he had to. Straightening, Mandolin headed back to Sarum. However, as he did, he cautiously wiped his hands clean of any further residue. Perhaps the dirt meant nothing, but he did not want to take any chances. Too many unsettling things were happening, and innocent bits of soil might just hint at some new or dire deed. He could not help his brother in the least if he suddenly became suspected of another crime. Mandolin grunted at his foolish thinking. Of what crime could dirt-covered hands condemn him in a farming region? Nonetheless, old Ison's brother continued to wipe his palms and fingers against his clothes all the way back to Sarum. A pair of guards came for old Dyson just as he finally managed to drift off into a troubled slumber. As he stirred, one of them rattled the cell door, then unlocked it. "Come with us," barked the taller of the two. A plain-faced younger man whom old Dyson knew as Dorius' nephew. "Don't give us no problems, huh?" In response, the farmer quietly placed his hands behind his back and turned so that the guards could secure his wrists. When they had done so, they let him out. Tiberius met them at the door leading outside. The captain made no attempt to hide his disappointment. Although he did not bother to explain to old Dyson the reason for his mood, the farmer could only assume that it boded ill for him. And sure enough, as he stepped out, old Dyson knew that matters had gone from bad to worse. He sighted the senior figure of the Cathedral of Light immediately and knew him to be more than simply a priest from the nearest town. This was a Master Inquisitor, one of the higher-ranking officials of the sect. Worse, the imperious-looking man was accompanied by several brooding guards and a very distraught Serathina and Achilles. The priest strode up to him. Gazing down his nose at the farmer, he declared in a much too loud voice, "Old Diason, son of Domides, know that I am Brother Machilius, Master Inquisitor of this region for the Great and Golden Prophet. I come to ascertain the depths of your guilt, and thereby judge what is needed to redeem your soul." He paused, then added, "And after that, the soul of whatever miscreant discredited the grave of our emissary, too." Old Diason went white. Brother Machilius had left no doubt that he considered the matter of a trial moot. This is not what Domides had been promised. Before he could even open his mouth to protest, the Master Inquisitor turned from him to where the headsman himself looked on with less enthusiasm than old Dyson himself liked. With your permission, Master Dorius, we shall make use of your quarters for questioning of this one. I apologize for the inconvenience, naturally. The cathedral loathes such inquiries, but they are on occasion becoming necessary, you understand? I wrote also to the Procurator General in Kedgen, Dorius replied, trying to regain control of the situation. I haven't heard word yet, but surely he'll be sending a proper authority. Brother Machilius shook his head. Through the prophet, blessed be him, I carry the proper authority myself for this good situation. The Procurator General rely on my good word. And from the Master Inquisitor's tone, thought Uldiason, Dorius and the rest were to rely on it. Also, whether they liked that fact or not. The farmer grimaced, considering how Brother Machilius had so far handled the matter. Uldiason also doubted that he would be allowed to say very much at his own defense, unless he chose to confess. There is also the matter of the Triune, Dorius added, as one of their own was also a victim. The cathedral is here, the temple is not. If the Triune is sloth in seeking justice for its children, it is their own failing. Defeated, the headman quieted. Uldiason bit back in apathy. Brother Machilius would not be denied. Uldiason tried to console himself with the fact that at least Lila had not been drawn into things that the farmer could not have stood for. She had already suffered too much at both sex hands. Even as he thought that, out of the corner of his eye, the telltale emerald green flashed. The farmer shook with dismay. Without meaning to, Uldiason glanced in that direction. Unfortunately, so did the Master Inquisitor. Lila stood like an animal caught in a trap. She appeared to have crept around the back of the boar's head to watch things unfold, and no doubt her fear for Uldiason had made her forget his warning. Brother Machilius could obviously see that, as she was not local. That itself might not have mattered, but there was also that in his gaze which met hers, seemed to Uldiason's to register some recognition. The robed figure thrust a condemning figure at the noblewoman. You, there! You! The sky thundered! This time with such vehemence that several people, including Machilius, had to cover their ears. The wind suddenly rose up, howling like a hungry wolf. People were thrust back in by the intensity. Several of the Inquisitor guards unable to keep their positions. Only 3 figures remained unmoved, at least momentarily, by the fearsome gale. Brother Machilius, Lila, and Uldiason. But the Master Inquisitor had to struggle to maintain his place. He tore his eyes from Lila, returning them to the prisoner. Brother Machilius' expression was terrible to behold. He eyed the farmer with what seemed both fury and fear. By the prophet, what are? A savage bolt of lightning struck the village center, and the Master Inquisitor. He had no time to scream. A sickening, burning stench filled the air, spread quickly by the wind. The bolt left barely a charred mass. Uldiason had seen the results of other strikes, but none with such intensity as this. A second bolt hit near the first. Someone let out a cry. People began scattering in every direction. The wind continued to howl through Serum, bowling over those not holding on to something solid. Uldiason looked for Lila, but she was nowhere to be found. A piece of rubbish flew up at his face, and the farmer instinctively blocked it with his arm. Only then did he notice that he was again free. The cuffs dangled loosely on one wrist, and when he tugged at them, the remaining one unlatched as if never locked. Not wasting time questioning the carelessness of the guards, Uldiason focused on what to do next. However, Brother Machilius' escort decided matters for him by trying to reach the freed prisoner, despite the terrible wind. 3 of them were already nearly in weapon range, with a 4th not far behind, But as the foremost reached him, out of the gale flew a thick wooden branch that Eldiason blatantly recognized as usually sitting in front of the tavern. Almost inerrantly, the bench collided with the guards, sending one sprawling and the other flying off with the makeshift missile. Some distance behind the sprawling figures, Lila reappeared, holding onto the corner of a smithy with one hand. She waited for Eldiason to come to her with the other. Without hesitation, the stunned farmer ran toward the noblewoman. All around him, loose objects darted through the air. People scurried into buildings. Another bolt struck near the village well, tearing apart most of the surrounding stone wall. Despite the many threats, though, Eldiason made it to Lila unscathed. Other than a few loose strands of golden hair, the woman too appeared untouched. Concerned for her overwhelmed all other thought. "Lila, you need to find shelter!" She seized his arm, but instead of coming with him to the smithy entrance, Lila tugged Eldiason toward the woods. Her strength was surprising, and rather than risk a struggle that would leave both of them out in the open for much long, the farmer allowed her to guide them both to Sarum. He knew that the common sense better dictated that they hide in some building, but Eldiason still somehow convinced himself that they would surely find just a safe location in the wild. Indeed, the wind seemed to lessen as they rushed deeper into the woods. Refuse still swept past them, but miraculously, nothing greater than a leaf ever touched them. From the direction of Sarum came a now familiar crackling sound. The sky momentarily lit up as the sun had suddenly burst through the cloud cover. Eldiason started to look over his shoulder, but Lila tugged him forward. Thunder continued to rumble as if the horses of 1,000 riders trampled over the land. That made the farmer think of the Inquisitors and the unfortunate brother Mikilios. The guards would surely be after Eldiason once the weather settled, especially after the unsettling death of their superior. While Eldiason blamed the cleric's horrific end on the miraculous aspects of nature, even though never in his life had the farmer witnessed such bizarre and deadly shift, he did not doubt that somehow Brother Mikilios' fate would somehow be tied to him, no matter how ridiculous that might seem. "Keep running!" Lila called, gazing over her shoulder at him. "Keep running!" But in concern for him, the noblewoman did not pay attention to her own path. Eldiason saw the dip in the landscape just before her foot settled into it. He tried to give warning, but by then his companion was already flailing. Her grip on Eldiason slipped, a short-lived cry escaping her lips. Lila tumbled forward, and as she landed, she twisted around. Stumbling, Eldiason went to her side. Lila lay there, her eyes open, but momentarily unseeing. "Lila!" All fear for the unnerving weather or the Inquisitor guards vanished utterly. All that mattered to the farmer was what the figure sprawled before him. To his great relief, the noblewoman blinked. Her eyes focused again. She looked up at Eldiason, and her expression made him redden. Trying to cover up his embarrassment, Eldiason gave her a hand. However, as Lila tried to stand, she let out a moan, and her right ankle buckled. I think it may be twisted," she managed. "Can you see?" He wanted to refuse, but knew that he could not leave her in pain. Mumbling an apology, Eldiason pushed the long skirt away just enough to reveal the ankle. It was black and blue, and already a bit swollen. When the farmer put a gentle hand to it, Lila gasped again. "I need to bring you to the healer," he muttered. "No, if you do that, then you'll be captured again. I won't let them do that to you." Eldiason frowned. What had she expected to eventually happen? He could not very well just run off. This was his home. His family had lived in Sarum for generations, possibly even since its beginning. More to the point, there were those he could not leave behind, especially Mendelin. Would surely pay if his brother could not be found. There was also Chilios, known to be Eldison's best friend, and even Serathina possibly risked being involved. But at the same time, how could he return? The Inquisitors might eventually leave, But Tiberius would assume that it's duty to arrest old Dyson on the spot if the farmer reappeared. There was also the possibility of peace warders of the temple also still arriving to make their own judgment of the murders. Old Dyson knelt there, one hand over the ankle, forgotten as he tried to think about what to do. Lila's fate concerned him as well, and at least matters would have been a little easier if her ankle had not been injured. Old Dyson? He paid her no mind, still caught up in his concerns. Perhaps he could carry her back to the farm, then from there, send her by horse to a neighboring settlement. She could get the aid she needed in one of the larger ones, then be on her way. At least then the noble woman would be at a risk. As for Dyson himself, that was another. Dyson! Although Lila kept her voice low, there was no mistaking the sharp emphasis in it this time. Old Dyson glanced around, certain that they had been discovered. However, there was no sign of anyone else, especially the Inquisitors or the guard. Old Dyson, she repeated. Not that! My ankle! The pain is gone! Her hopeful words only fueled his worries. If she felt no pain, it was likely that the ankle had gone numb. Not a good sign. He pulled his hand aside, fearful of what he would see, and finding instead that the ankle now looked perfectly healthy. But old Dyson stared at the limb, certain that he saw wrong. At the very least, the ankle had been bruised badly, and now was not. He looked at Lila, and the way in which she gazed at him only made old Dyson more uncomfortable. There was awe, incredible awe, and what seemed almost worship? You turned away, the noble woman murmured, but you left your hand near my ankle. I knew you were not touching it, but suddenly it felt a wonderful warmth, and the pain just went away. That's not possible. There must be some reasonable explanation. An injury like that doesn't just heal. You did it. At first he thought that he had not heard Lila correctly. Then, when her words at last registered with him, old Dyson could scarcely believe that the noble woman would even consider something so outrageous. I'm no mage or witch, he insisted, taken aback. Your ankle was obviously not hurt after all. That's the only answer. She shook her head, eyes filled with something that should have gladdened his soul, but only unnerved him more. Adoration. No, I know the pain I felt. I know what I sensed from your hand. And I know that all the pain then disappeared, as if it had never been. Old Dyson stepped back from her. But I didn't do it. The blonde woman rose, then stepped toward him. Lila moved without the least hint of injury. Then who? Who performed such a miracle? The last word sent shivers through him. He would not hear her. We have no time for such foolishness. He looked up. The sky seemed calmer, at least by then. The thunder yet rolled in the direction of Sarum. Another bolt flashed over the village. The storm. Old Dyson had no other word for the peculiar weather. Seems to be stalled. Praise be for that bit of luck. I do not think it was luck, the noble woman murmured. Then what? The farmer cut off, his face now blanching. No, Lila, don't even jest. But do you not see, old Dyson? How timely was that wind? How righteous was that bolt that struck the arrogant brother Machilius just before he could condemn you for murders you did not commit? And now you'd claim to have powers that did slay a man? Think of that woman. For the first time since he had met her, old Dyson wanted to be nowhere near Lila. It was not that she'd still find her desirable, but surely she suffered from some dementia. Perhaps the strain caused on her by her family's misfortune had finally taken its toll. That had to be the explanation for her behavior. But what explained the injury that old Dyson had seen? He did not consider himself an imaginative nature. How then could his mind have conjured up such an elaborate delusion? No! The farmer snapped at himself. If he followed such reasoning, he would find himself believing Lila's outlandish suggestion. If that happened, it would be better for old Dyson to turn himself into the Inquisitors or the Guard before he truly did endanger someone else. A soft, warm touch on his hand stirred him back to the moment. Lila stood barely an inch from him. I know it was you who healed me, old Dyson. And I believe that it is you who summoned the wind and the lightning in the time of our need. Lila, please, listen to the absurdity of what you say. Her flawless face filled his vision. You want me to believe otherwise? Then prove me wrong. The noble woman gently took him by the chin and turned his gaze so that it fell upon the direction of Sarum. The lightning still falls, bringing justice and retribution with it. The sky still roars its anger at the false accusations made against you. The wind howls at the presumption of those who would judge you when they themselves are guilty. Stop it, Lila! But she would not. In a firm, even defiant voice, Lila said, Prove me wrong, dear old Dyson. With all your might, for the sky to be quiet, nay, even clear. And if it does not, then I will gladly admit that I was sorely deluded. Her lower lip stiffened. Gladly. Old Dyson could not believe that Lila was so deluded that she could even imagine that something like she suggested was possible. Still, if the noblewoman meant what she said, it was the quickest and easiest way to snap her back to reality. Without another word, the farmer turned toward the turbulent heavens. Although he could not have simply looked at them and pretended to be concentrating, old Dyson somehow felt that doing so would be a betrayal to his companion, even if he knew nothing would happen. And so, the son of Domit squinted and thought. He wished the violent weather to vanish and the clouds to clear away. He tried to take the situation as seriously as he could, only if for Lila's sake. But he was not surprised when everything remained as it was. Certain that he had given Lila's delusion as much of a chance as anyone else could have, the farmer wearily turned back to her. He expected the noblewoman to be distraught, but Lila instead only looked patient. I did what you asked, and you saw what happened, or didn't, he said soothingly. Now, let me take you away from here, Lila. We've got to find a place where we can rest and compose our minds. Unfortunately, instead of agreeing, Lila continued to stare past him expectantly. Old Dyson's own patience finally came to an end. Lila had swept his heart up the moment that he had first seen her, but he could not tolerate her delusion any longer just because of that. It was for her own good, if nothing else. Lila, you've got to pull yourself together. I did what you asked, and it came to pass, she murmured, her face suddenly glowing with renewed adoration. Lila gently took hold of the farmer by his arms and looked back toward the village. Old Dyson, about to reprimand her further, stopped. His mouth hung open. The sun shone over Sarum. The Grand Temple of the Triune, located 2 days' ride south of Kedgen, was a sprawling triangular edifice with 3 high towers, each situated at one of the points. The pinnacles themselves were 3-sided, each with face marked by one of the holy orders. Triangular windows line the towers from bottom to the top. Nearly all things concerning the structure were of a similar triple nature. To reach the entrance, which faced Kejin, pilgrims needed to ascend 3 levels, with each level consisting of 33 steps. At the entrance itself, 3 massive bronze doors, also triangular, allowed the faithful into the vast welcoming hall within. Worshippers were naturally greeted within the glorious effigies of the 3 guiding spirits. Bala, the creator, loomed on the left. The androgynous figure clad in the robe of its order. In Bala's hands were the mystical hammer and a bag, which the clerics preached contained the seeds of all life. Both nature and the architectural triumphs of humanity were under the aspects of this spirit. Dialon hovered in the right. The marble statue, much akin to the first, save that this figure held to its breast the tablets of order. Dialon brought purpose to humanity, and the tablets taught how to achieve blessedness. As with Bala, Dialon wore the colors associated with those following the principles of determination. And in the center stood Mephis, who carried nothing but cupped its hands as if cradling the most tender of infants. Without love, creation, and determination could not so thrive. So taught the Grand Priest, the Primus, who some said surely had to be the child of Mephis. So caring was he of his flock. Under each of the giants, another bronze door gave way to the grand chambers of the various orders. Pilgrims and novices who found one preferable over the other would enter through these and listen to the words of that particular high priest. Peace warders cowled guards in leather who wore the symbols of all 3 orders on their chest guided newcomers to their most likely choice. Within each chamber, several hundred could kneel in prayer at one time. And when the Primus himself made an appearance, the walls between the 3 orders' walls, which, although they had the facade of stone, were made of wood, were slid back into hidden niches so that all could bask in the Grand Priest's noble presence. Upon an elevated dais before his followers, the leader of the Triad would bring forth the word of the 3. Today, however, the faithful came to make their own prayers, for the Primus was in council with his 3 most beloved, the high priests of each order. Chief among them was the tall, athletic Malik, senior of those of his rank. He had risen from an eager acolyte to his venerable role through determination, creative thinking, and devotion to his master. He was, even the other 2 knew, the right hand of the Primus. The private chamber in which they met was a small, almost empty place. The only furniture at all was the Primus's regal chair, the back of which rose high above his head and featured the triangular symbol of the sect. Twin torches set in the wall niches illuminated the oval chamber. Not that there was anything else to see but the chair's occupant, which was exactly the point. The Primus gazed down at the 3 as he quietly spoke words for their ears alone. Of all, Malak and his counterparts knew the innermost secrets of the Triune as no one else did. The Grand Priest's voice was pure music. His face could have been chiseled from marble. So unmarred was it. He had long flowing hair of silver with a short, well-trimmed beard that matched it. His features were very angular, and his eyes were of a gleaming emerald. He was taller and stronger looking than most men, but despite his commanding appearance, moved at all times with a practiced gentleness. Until now, only Malik, surreptitiously lifting his gaze up, noticed the sudden and very slight tremor. Under his dark brow, the high priest of the Order of Memphis watched with concealed concern. But the Primus evidently saw that concern despite Malik's attempts. Completely recovered now, the Triune's beloved leader made a single gesture of dismissal, to which the mustached Malik quickly alerted the others with a tap of his own hand. The three senior priests' heads kept low, quickly retreated from the private chamber. The Primus sat silent, his eyes apparently staring at the empty air before him. The flames of the torches suddenly flickered madly, as if a strong gust of wind briefly danced about the room. And the torches returned to normal. A shift came over the benevolent visage of the Primus. There was nothing holy in his aspect now. In fact, any who would have witnessed it would have found it quite the opposite, and likely feared for their very soul. Then, too, west of the city, he rasped in a voice now more like a serpent's than a man's. West of the city.